Sure. So I have been a police officer since 2012, so almost 10 years. Um, I always knew I wanted to go into some sort of service related field. My father is military police. He has been in the United States Army for 32 years and actually just retired a year or so ago. My brother went into the Army after college. He became an Army Ranger. My grandfather was a police officer in Boston, Massachusetts, and my uncle was a police officer in New York, actually on 9/11.
Wow.
So I just have that embedded in who I am. And so I knew that I wanted to go into that service. And I am not really a city girl. I Everyone always says like, oh, why didn't you want to be a Boston police officer like your grandfather? And I like skyscrapers and all of those people is just not my jam. So I am a police officer up in the middle of nowhere in New Hampshire where the roads are not all paved and we have more animals than we do people and that kind of thing. And I love it up here and I love being a police officer, but only 13% of police officers are female. And up here, especially, that's really noticeable because you've got all of these fairly small departments. You're talking about the department I work for right now has 6 people in it. And most of the departments in the area are right around that. We've got some departments in the area that are only the chief of police. That's the only person that they have. And then we've got some that go up a little bit more. The biggest city, I guess you would call it, in our area has about 40 police officers. And so that's pretty much the realm that we're in. And that's pretty unusual. Most of the towns have a handful of police officers. If they have a police department at all, we actually have some towns in the area that depend entirely on state police. So there's a realm up here of that kind of thing. And very few of those police officers are female. If at all, there's usually one in a department. So I am very used to being that one in the various police departments that I have worked at up here in this area. And so I've worked for 3 departments in the area. I worked for that 40-person police department, the really big one. I worked for a medium-sized one where there's about 20 people, and now I work for one that only has the 6 people. So I've kind of been at all ends of the spectrum, and each department has its own culture. Each department has its own kind of atmosphere of what's going on there. And it really depends on the type of people that are your coworkers and how long they've been on, what their thoughts are on different things. And it can be a really great time when you are working with people that kind of think the same way as you and accept you for who you are. And it can be really difficult too when you're working with people who have that old school attitude that women don't belong here. So it's a realm of the spectrum, and there are people at all ends of it and everywhere along the way, and it becomes kind of a daily battle of sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. But that's kind of police work in general as well.
That's true. That's very, very true. It is. Saying all that, I assume that, to be honest with you, being a police officer, you get that stress of the police work itself. Then, like you mentioned, being a police officer, but a female police officer, that's a different type of stress, in all honesty. So how did you deal with all of that? Did you really look back? Because as you mentioned earlier, I know your partner is a police officer as well. Hopefully, well, not hopefully, I know for sure he's a support in everything that you do and you say. I assume he played a huge part in that. And again, with your family background and being into the police and military field, that probably played a part, as in you just keep going strong and you keep moving forward. So how did you deal with all that, and where do you really draw your strength and your support from?
It's important to have those people around you that support you and that you can draw that strength from. And my family and my husband have all been super supportive of me throughout this entire process. And sometimes you do need to rely on them to kind of put the world back in perspective when you do have an encounter that is really negative. And there have been many times where I come home to my husband, who is probably one of the most feminist men that can exist. You know, he believes that I am just as worthy as anyone else to be standing next to him. Like, he has said it many times that he would rather have me by his side going in somewhere than, you know, some big macho guy or whatever. But not everyone thinks like that. And so I've come home and had, you know, just been really angry and frustrated, and he's had to put that back in perspective, that there are more people that think like him than think like those other folks. So it's important to remember that that is a dying attitude. It just hasn't died altogether yet. And unfortunately, when you hear that negativity, it can sound really loud because it just bounces around in your head, and that's all you seem to hear. But it's the minority voice. You know, it's not what everyone thinks. And there was a time where it was the opposite. And we're lucky enough that we've gotten to the point where most people are pretty supportive. And you just have to remember that, and that singular voice shouldn't be the loud one, even though it often is.
I love how that sounds. Have you actually encountered anyone while doing the police work that says, hey, guess what? I don't want to be touched or arrested by a female, or she's not qualified. What is she doing here? And like stuff like that. And how did that make you feel, if that ever happened?
Absolutely. I have had, you know, people on the street that, you know, you show up to do your job and they're going to disrespect you. And it's a hard balance, because you want to be yourself when you show up on different calls. Like, I have my own style of how I talk to people. I'm very respectful. I want this to be a decent experience, even when the bad thing has to happen. You know, you get to a point and like, okay, you're under arrest. This doesn't have to be a super negative experience. We can just kind of go take care of this and have it get over with. And there are some people that's just not gonna work. You have to kind of put on the bitch attitude and be like, okay, like we're done being nice now. This is kind of where we have to go now. And there's always going to be people that respond negatively to that. I've been actively arresting people and had them be like, why aren't you making me a sandwich? And, you know, you should be at home typing and not out here, and like blah blah blah. And, you know, most of the people that want to run their mouth do so after they're already in handcuffs. There's nothing they can do. You know, it's really just them trying to make themselves feel better and whatnot. But it can be really painful, I guess, hurtful, when you're trying to do the best you can. And especially when you, like, for instance, pull a car over, you have every intention of just giving it a warning, like, you know, they were going a little too fast. You're just doing your job. You're slowing them down. You're telling them like, hey, slow it down. You had no intention of giving them a ticket. You're having a good day. You feel like you were being nice to them. And they just spin around and start in with that, like, what are you even doing out here? Don't you know where you belong? And it can just feel really shitty, because you're like, wait a second, like, I didn't deserve this. And it happens. And you know, I've had the days where I've let it eat away at me and I've let it make me feel really bad. And I have the days where I can laugh at it and be like, really? Like, where did that come from? And you just have to be able to have the laugh about it days more often than the I'm going to let it eat at me days. And there are days where that happens. And you just have to be able to eventually get back on the right track, or else you're never going to be able to survive, because unfortunately, there are always going to be those people. And you have to understand that those people are still assholes to men too. It's just they have different ammunition when they're talking to you. So it hits differently. It feels different. A lot of people will never understand. But if you can find those couple people that you can laugh about it later with and tell those stories, and, you know, understand that those people are jerks and that's on them, not on you, then you're going to be better off. And it is hard. I've worked with people like that. I had a coworker who told my sergeant that they wouldn't back me up because they didn't
Wow.
believe that I was here, I should be here. And I was young in my career at that point, and that really hurt me because, again, I go to work every day and feel like I try twice as hard to earn the respect that the males get automatically. So to have someone say that, and then to have my sergeant not like blow him up over that, was really painful because I felt like I deserved more from
Mhm.
both of them. But I was so early in my career, I just kind of accepted it and, felt bad about it. And it happens. And I don't know what I could have done to change it. I probably, at this point in my career, would have just like went up one side and down the other of him. But again, that I had to get to that point where I was comfortable with myself. And that took some time because when I was early in my career, I put up with a lot of stuff that I wouldn't put up with now. But I was so scared then because I didn't want to be singled out because I was the female. I didn't want to be looked at differently. And you have to get to the point where you are different and you have to use that to your advantage.
So do you feel, I guess you feel now that you have, again, the biggest thing is that support system now, that you could go to someone to talk to, you could go and enjoy those moments, again, with your partner, with, I guess, with your coworkers, they've actually given you better support and all that now, to actually overcome those times, which kind of sucks.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think early on I hadn't established that support system as much. And even the support system I had, I was still kind of putting that show of being super tough on for them. So I didn't want to complain about the silly things because I didn't want them to know that or think that they were bothering me or anything like that. And I wasn't as confident in my abilities then. I was still learning the job. I was still getting comfortable with doing different things. So I had some doubt in myself. And so I let the doubt of other people kind of take up too much space because of my own doubts.
Mm.
Whereas now 10 years in, like I'm really confident in what I do. I've actually done a lot of really impressive things that a lot of my male coworkers haven't done. I'm a certified SWAT operator. I'm all of these things that a lot of men can't say they are, and I've done them and I am them. And so now I'm just comfortable being me because I've already kind of established myself. And that would be what I would tell incoming female police officers, is that you are going to be uncomfortable, and what you just have to kind of get comfortable in your own skin and be comfortable with yourself before you can expect other people to be comfortable with you.
I like that. I was actually going to ask you, would you actually tell the upcoming females, but you kind of took care of that portion of it, which is fantastic. So saying that, then, is there anything that you like to change in the whole police department to be, I guess the biggest thing is just be more acceptable to females in their up and coming within the police officer, and I guess in the police district, because at the end of the day, it is somebody that's saying, I want to serve a community and make it the best they can. Well, the good cops in quotation. And from there, no matter female, male, anyone in between, to be honest with you, those ones, everyone that actually chooses to wear that badge should be respected overall, because at the end of the day, those are the ones that are going to have your back when the times are tough.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things, and this was hard for me too, is to remember that you don't have to be a guy or be one of the guys to be accepted into this community. And I think that the community has to start recognizing that also. I think one of the things that a lot of female officers do, and that I definitely did coming in, was that I tried to hide my femininity as much as possible. I wanted them to forget when we were on the job that I was a woman so that they could see me as one of the guys. So I was, I was talking tough, I was acting tough, I was dressing a certain way. I didn't want people to, know about my secret habit of going home and watching musicals on my days off, because that was a really girly thing, right? I didn't want them to think about the girly things that I did because I wanted them to see me as this tough, masculine one of the guys. And that was the only way I saw that I could fit in and that I could be one of them and that I could do the job. But that's not true. You can own the fact that you're a woman, and you can own the fact that you're as feminine as you want to be or whatnot, and still be good at your job. We shouldn't have to hide the girly parts of us in order to do this job. And I think that in the military and all of those male dominated kind of atmospheres, that's what we think we have to do in order to become one with the rest of the community, when in reality we should just be able to be ourselves and still do the job. As long as you can do the job at the end of the day, that's the requirement, right? So you don't have to be this perfect image of a man woman in order to do it. And that's the attitude that we have to take out of the community so that everyone feels included. Because right now you feel like you have to step in and be one of the guys, whereas you should feel like you can just step in and be yourself. And as long as you can do the job, those guys should accept you.
I 100% agree with you. You mentioned that there's very low females in your department. Have you spoken to them in regards to this, like the up and coming ones, or are you like still the newest female in your department?
So in the department I currently work for, I am still the only female in the department. I know that many years ago there was one other, and so there's only been two in the history of my department.
Oh, wow.
The larger department in the area, the one that's got about 40 officers, they actually have 2 or 3 other females. There's a department next door to the one that I work in that's got about 8, I think, officers, and they have 2 females on their roster. And the funny thing is, everyone assumes that we're all friends because we're the only girls. And we are, but that's not the reason that we're friends. I mean, when you're in an area where there's just so few people, that you end up being friends with people you have stuff in common with. So it just so happens that we're all friends, but it's hard to be like grouped into those are the females, right? You don't want to just be grouped into that one topic. Like, that's not what defines us. That's not what makes us friends. That's not even what makes us like each other. It's just kind of how we got introduced. And we do talk about the different things that we deal with that our male coworkers will never know anything about. Like, one of the big jokes is all of our male coworkers can pee standing up. It takes them 13 seconds to go to the bathroom, right? But we got to take the gun belt off. We got to like find a place to put it, all this stuff. It's hard. It's really hard. And nobody understands that other than female officers. But, you know, we joke about those kind of things. And we also, those are the supports that you can go to when you are having an issue that someone else might not understand because they've never been through it. Because even the most understanding, even my husband, who, you know, tries his best to understand, he'll never really know what it's like to be in my shoes. So it is nice to be able to have those conversations with other women who do understand it.
That's awesome. And it's funny that you mentioned that, because where I work, I have a female that I work with. And then she mentioned the workers have to wear coveralls, which is like a full coverall. And she's just like, you guys have no clue how much it is to take, because you guys just have to zip down and just go. We have to take off the whole thing, make sure it doesn't touch the floor, make sure this happens. I'm like, yeah, like I understand. She's like, this is why I just wear just pants. It just makes it easier. And Melissa's like, yeah, that makes sense. That makes perfect sense. And I fully understand, because there's a lot of things I feel that we have these uniforms. Whether it doesn't matter what kind of work we have, but it's very male friendly.
Yes.
Versus female friendly, or just everyone friendly in that sense. Like, they should really accommodate all aspects of life. Therefore, you don't have to have those troubles in those times of needs, because those times of needs, to be honest with you, it could be the fact that, in honesty, like it could be the fact that when you're in danger, for example, You go from, again, a guy using the washroom, at least their gun holster is beside them and they're ready to go in case of anything. A female holster, female, when they're using the washroom, as you mentioned, you got to take that off.
Yep.
Now you're now at that moment, the time now it takes, and I don't know the whole police thing, but I understand in a defensive or an offensive way, it's a fact that how long does it take to get your weapon for you to
Yep.
defend yourself, and you taking it off, now that's a time delay in a sense, right? So those
Absolutely.
things, I'm seeing that, and I'm like, I know about it, but those things, I think overall we should be looking at it and making sure that it's equal on both sides.
Well, even just the general design of most of our uniforms, like the way that we carry the weight, and our bodies are built different, and not just male to female, but each individual body is built different. And so, for me, I putting all that weight around my hips is really uncomfortable. I go home, I have bruises when I take it off on my hip bones from just where the gun belt digs in, and just different things like that. And we're starting to develop the carriers, the vest carriers, that we can start putting weight in different places, and that's great. But we're still not to the point where it's customizable in the sense that it really needs to be. And I understand uniformity, and I know why we kind of follow that pattern, but there's a point where uniformity is detrimental.
Yeah.
And this is one of those cases where, when I do come home to go to the bathroom, I come home to my house to go to the bathroom because I live in the town that I work in, and that's the safest place for me to go. And I still have to take all that stuff off, and so it still takes me time to put it all back on. Whereas, my guy coworkers, they can go to the bathroom anywhere. Like, they stop in at CVS, like, oh, okay, whatever. And for females, all of those safety things come into play, because we have to think about, okay, does the door go all the way to the floor? Because you can't put your gun belt on the floor if someone can reach under the stall and take it. You can't hang it on the back of the door if someone can reach over the door and take it. So there are all these things that you have to think about that makes it that much more complicated just to do something as simple as go to the bathroom. And so that was actually one of the first things when I started at the larger department that had other females. That was the first thing that somebody did, was like, take me around and like, okay, here's a place that's safe that you can go to the bathroom, and like all these things. And when my first department that I worked for, I actually had keys to different city buildings that I could let myself into on the night shift, because those were safe places where I could go to the bathroom. And so I had keys that some of the men didn't have, just for that reason, so that I could go to the bathroom. And it was like, okay, you have to think ahead on something so simple, and something so that probably most of my male counterparts don't even have to think about. They never worry about that problem, and I'm literally planning my day around it.
Wow. Yeah, that is quite interesting. That is very interesting, and I'm glad that we're actually talking about this, because you're absolutely right. You're right, and you said that key word, which is detrimental, because those minor things that you think it's like those everyday, you don't really think about it, because it's like it's those everyday activities that you do. But then again, when your life is on that line, you're like, wait a second, if this was different, the outcome would be different. So that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Honestly, Nina, I have nothing else for you. Final thoughts. I think we said the many final thoughts. I'm not sure if you have anything you want to add to that. I'm more than willing to listen.
It's a hard thing when you feel like other people don't understand what you're going through. And when you are looking at a profession, whatever the profession is, and you don't see yourself reflected back at you, it can be hard to feel like you are ever going to be accepted in that situation, or in that profession, or in whatever it is. And in something like police work, where it's in the public's eye right now, right? Everybody's talking about it, everybody's watching you so carefully, and all of this stuff, it can feel very isolating, and it can feel like you're even more under the microscope, especially when you're the only one, right? People go into my department and they don't refer to me by name. They say the girl cop, or that woman, or whatever. And obviously everyone knows who they're talking about. They don't, but it can be very singling to feel like that's how you're viewed by the people that you're serving. And it can be hard to look at it that way. And I hope that in the future, it's different and that it is more 50-50 and that there are just as many women as there are men. And so that doesn't become the defining feature of who I was in my department. But right now, that's the reality. And you just have to find those people that you can laugh about it with, because at the end of the day, most of police work is being able to laugh off what happened.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's just some of the things that happen, like you just look and wonder, how did humanity even get to this point? Because people can be so dumb. And so you have to be ready to laugh. And that's a really important factor. But you also have to know where the line is for when something becomes a problem. Because looking back, there were definitely things that I laughed off because I felt like I had to, that I really didn't have to laugh off, that I could have changed, or I could have said something to make it known that that wasn't okay, or just whatever. And so you have to be ready to laugh, but you also have to know what's okay to not be okay with, and be willing to stand up for yourself in that. And there were a lot of times that I regret not standing up for myself early on, because it does set a precedence for later on in your career as well. If you've always been okay with something, people are going to assume you're okay with it.
You're absolutely on that one. And that goes not just in the police force, but that goes everywhere. We should not be comfortable for things that we should not be comfortable for. So I love that.